It just so happens that today, the 30th of January, is a young man's birthday. His best friend has gifted him a burned CD with a game on it. He asks what game's on the disc, and his friend tells him it's some random game that they found online. He pops the disc into the console and finds something totally alien, a game he's never heard of before. The game is an RPG, but it doesn't look quite like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. It's something new. He's charmed by the game's sense of humor and air of mystery, enticing him to continue on this little adventure. As he progresses through the game, his friend watches with anticipation. On the same day he received the game, this kid managed to beat it. But before the game ends, the characters suddenly acknowledge this young man's existence and even wish him a happy birthday. How was something like this possible? The boy's friend excitedly revealed that they made this game using RPG Maker, a program used for developing your own role-playing games. If this story sounds familiar, you may have already heard it from Mortis Ghost himself on the RPG Maker Cola podcast. During the interview, Ghost recalls the time he spent making games with RPG Maker. He and his friend had dreamed of someday making their own RPG, and this program made it possible to turn that dream into reality. Though as much as Ghost loved video games, he also really enjoyed art, and specifically making comics. So get this, Ghost actually comes from a family full of artists. His grandfather was a painter and his parents were comedians. When Ghost exhibited an interest in drawing at a young age, his family naturally encouraged his artistic hobby. Fast forward to the mid-2000s, Ghost was attending St. Luc Liège School of Art and Design in Belgium. There he focused on making comics and improving his art. Comics were very important to Ghost. He wanted to be the best artist he could possibly be. In an episode of Creative Block, he even joked about comics being his very own sacred mission. Whenever he caught some free time from his studies, he would tinker with the 2003 version of RPG Maker. When you boot up this program, you're given access to a bunch of pre-made assets. But this time around, Ghost wanted to make a game using his own original assets. He started by creating the game's first level out of original tiles. Then he began scanning and uploading his own drawings into the game for the world's characters. After creating the first level of the game, Ghost went and showed it to one of his friends. Once his friend had seen this short demo, they quickly offered to do music for the game. From there, Ghost teamed up with alias Conrad Coldwood and formed Unproductive Funtime. Development on this little project ran pretty smoothly. Ghost had fun working during his free time and even took a little vacation in the middle of the game's development. Working with ACC also went very well. According to the FAQ on the Unproductive Funtime website, ACC states that there were a shocking number of times where he had got certain tracks just right without even discussing it with Ghost first. Sometimes when ACC had made a prototype track, Ghost would immediately find the right place to use this song. Apparently this happened quite a few times. ACC writes, "Looking back, it was really weird." In 2008, Ghost tried his best to wrap up development on this project. Finals were quickly approaching at St. Luc Liège, so he desperately needed to focus on school. The game was soon finished, but the initial release was pretty buggy. Ghost was unsatisfied with this version of the game, so he worked hard to hammer out these bugs. Later versions of the game would offer a more smooth and mostly bug-free experience that Ghost was very proud of. On May 14th, 2008, Unproductive Funtime would release the cult indie RPG, Off. The game was uploaded online to several French game-making forums. Ghost was delighted to see that the game had reached over 50 players and he considered it a big success. A while later, Ghost was approached by Quinn K, who offered to translate the game into English. The first version of this English translation would be released in 2011, opening up Off to a wider audience. The game was praised for its surreal story, unique art style, and bizarre characters. Even if you haven't played Off yourself, you've likely heard about the game's influence. This game inspired a lot of developers. Hell, you've probably played an Off-inspired game or two if you're into indie games. Back in the day, Off was pretty popular on Tumblr as well. Fan art, cosplays, and animations were all over the place, and it was amazing to see. I don't go to many conventions, but when I do, I always see at least one off cosplay. I went to one earlier this year and I saw a Zachary. It was pretty cool. I discovered off while I was in high school. I was waist deep in RPG Maker games at the time. The pixelated graphics meant that the games would have no problem running on my old-ass weak laptop. On top of that, they were free, so of course I played every single one I could get my hands on. To sweeten the deal even further, many of these games were horror games, a genre I was loving more and more every day. Mad Father, The Witch's House, Eve, and The Crooked Man are all extremely nostalgic for me. Eventually, I did cut my way through this library of games and I was super bummed. I dug around online for more RPG Maker horror games and I couldn't find anything that I hadn't already played. That was until I somehow found Off. At this point in time, the English translation had already been out for a couple of years. Yet, all I knew about this game was that it was considered a horror game, and that was enough for me. Plus, the art from the screenshots looked pretty cool, so I gave the game a shot. Guys, Off is a game that has stuck with me for years and I can still vividly recall moments from my first playthrough of the game. Listen, I could go on and on, but I'll have plenty of time to gush about the game later. Once the game was said and done with, I accepted that this is the kind of game that stands alone as is. As the years went on, my love for this game never faded, and neither did my desire for new Off-related content. Fast forward to November 16th, 2024. Ghost uploaded this image to Twitter. Over the next few days, Ghost would continue to upload new art depicting characters from Off. And these images had sent the Off community into a frenzy. What did it mean? Was there a new game coming? A re-release on Steam? New merch? Or was he just uploading some art? On November 26th, Ghost uploaded this video to Twitter. The video revealed new Off merchandise coming to Fangamer. The Batter bobblehead, Zachary mask pins, the Judge plushie, and a t-shirt. The video ends with text reading December 19th, purified.zone. Fans quickly discovered that purified.zone is a website. If you try to visit the site now, you'll be redirected to the offtherpg.com website. But originally, Purified.zone would take you to a mostly empty webpage where you could sign up for the Off newsletter. Every now and then, characters from Off, like the Judge and Zachary, would appear on screen to greet you. However, one of these characters didn't appear in Off. That would be this single eyeball. Their message reads, "Is that you, Cobb? Oh, no, you're not. You're someone else." Very interesting. Fans also pointed out that Ghost's video displays an area that wasn't present in the version of Off that we're all familiar with. This room is a deep red color and it's full of staircases. Another interesting detail. Both this eye character and the red room had sent shockwaves through the Off community. Dozens of theories were popping up left and right as fans were desperate for some answers. Luckily, they wouldn't have to wait long as all would be revealed on December 19th. On that day, we got a trailer for a new version of Off coming to Steam and Nintendo Switch. At Purified.zone, Mortis Ghost himself appeared on stream to talk about this new version of the game. Ghost confirmed that this game would include quality of life features, a hint system, a new UI, new content, and a revamped combat system. Many people consider Off's combat to be one of the weakest aspects of the game, so it was really exciting to hear that the team was working hard to improve on Off's weaker qualities. The most concerning bit of information shared during the stream was the fact that the game's original soundtrack would not appear in this version of the game. When I heard this news, I was crushed. Off's battle theme, Pepper Steak, is iconic and easily my favorite track in the entire game. Ghost didn't explain why ACC wouldn't be returning for this new version of Off, but we wouldn't have to wait long for his side of the story. On December 25th, 2024, this user made this post on r/offthegame. In this post, OP explains how they went ahead and emailed ACC to ask about why he didn't return to work on the game. ACC actually responded and listed 3 reasons as to why he chose not to work on this new version of Off. I've provided a link to this post in the description so you can read the entirety of ACC's response there. And I'll also have the entire thing on screen so you can just pause if you want to read the whole thing. I'll mainly be reading out the 3 main reasons that ACC lists. In this email, ACC writes, 1. I'm busy and can't afford to write new tracks if needed. 2. I'm excessively paranoid and distrustful of the language used in contracts in general. I heard enough horror stories regarding legal binding contracts to know I don't want to bring that into my life. It's even worse when it's coming from people I don't know and never asked to collaborate with in the first place. And 3. They had plans to re-release the soundtrack. It's fine and all, but that means there would be no noticeable difference between the free, original release and the new, paid-for release. The internet being what it is, I'm expecting the publisher to enter the tracks into a content ID system to make sure no one shares the paid-for soundtrack, which would be the exact same tracks that have been used countless times in various projects and uploaded to multiple streaming services. I was afraid that after years and years of people asking me for permission to upload things, I would have to explain to them why it's been taken down. Going from, "It's fine, you can use it, I don't mind," to, "It's out of my control, sorry, lol," felt a bit too harsh for me. Just to make things clear, Dan Moore of Fangamer has been very friendly and excessively patient with me. The fact that the original soundtrack is not in the re-release is entirely on me having cold feet about the situation. So as much as it broke my heart to hear that ACC wouldn't return, I totally get where he's coming from. I was initially very worried about the new soundtrack, but once I heard who would be composing it, I instantly felt relieved. On June 3rd, 2025, a new trailer was shown for OFF that highlighted the new combat system, bosses, and the people behind the new soundtrack. James Roach, Morosk, Exahava, Banshee Beat, Night Margin, and Toby Fox. That stacked lineup ensured that the new soundtrack would be full of fantastic songs that I could appreciate alongside the original. It was very much a holy shit 2 cakes situation for me. On August 15th, this new version of OFF was finally released on Steam and Nintendo Switch. And now that we have the history of the game out of the way, we can finally talk about this game. So let's go ahead and dive into the strange and haunted world of OFF. Right off the bat, we need to clear something up. Is this version of OFF a remaster or a remake? The official website refers to it as a re-release, people online often call it a remake, and various news sites call it a remaster. So what do I do? I'm choosing to call it a remaster, solely because I read a couple of interviews with Mortis Ghost where the interviewer is calling the game a remaster. So that's that. Sorry if that isn't entirely accurate. After selecting a new game, we're asked to identify ourselves. Once a name and gender has been entered, we're assigned to take control of an entity known as the Batter. This character has been entrusted with a sacred mission, and it's our duty to help him achieve this goal. We're then let out into Zone 0 and told to find the judge. Stepping out into Zone 0, we immediately run into a small cat with a big mischievous grin. The Batter explains that he's on a mission to purify the world, and the judge agrees to provide assistance for our mission. The judge offers to show us the basics of combat, and now it's time to play ball. Battles have changed quite a bit from the original game. The original version of OFF uses the battle system proposed by RPG makers, so it was pretty basic. The turn-based battles use a system similar to Final Fantasy's ATB gauge. Once that white bar near a character's name fills up, it'll be their turn to act. And just like with Final Fantasy, you can also choose for combat to be in active or wait mode. In active mode, the ATB gauges will continue to fill at all times, allowing for a more fast-paced combat where you can't afford to be indecisive. In wait mode, the ATB gauge will freeze once it's someone's turn, allowing you to carefully consider your next move with all the time in the world. On a character's turn, they can do a basic attack, defend, use a skill known as a competence, or use an item. The other characters that join the party are known as add-ons. There's 3 of them, and they're all named after Greek letters: Alpha, Omega, and Epsilon. They're less like characters and more like, weapons. The add-ons don't have any distinct personalities, but they are capable of attacking, defending, and using competences all on their own. Each party member has their own unique abilities that help shape their role in the party. So there's actually a lot to consider when you enter combat, if the enemies aren't already dead after like the second turn. Yeah, combat is ridiculously easy in the original OFF. We battle against the specters haunting this land, but the party has some pretty high stats that make ghost busting a cinch. It doesn't help that your competences are pretty cheap, so you can spam strong attacks without any fear of losing all your competence points. Save points are also pretty abundant, so you can easily find one and use it to restore all of your HP and competence points before you ever get too low. Fights get even easier if you put the battle in auto mode, where the party will attack entirely on their own. And this isn't like a Persona Rush mode where the characters spam their basic melee attacks. No, auto mode allows the party in off to also use their competences, so they can get through a lot of battles without any of your input. You can rely on auto mode to get through like 90% of the game's fights. On a recent replay, I only needed to take my party off auto mode during the boss fights. Your party won't heal while they're on auto mode, so you have to play it safe during these encounters. The bosses are the closest thing you'll get to any difficulty in the game. These guys are also pretty tanky, so the fights can really drag on. Of course, it wasn't a huge deal. I mean, some of my favorite aspects of the game come from things outside of combat. Regardless, I was very excited to see how battles would be improved in the remaster. During the combat tutorial with the judge, he introduces us to some of the remaster's new features. The first thing you'll notice in battle is that fancy new UI. Look at it, it's so sleek and cool. In fact, the main menu also got a makeover. The menus from the original game were very plain and simple, so having something more detailed like this is awesome. During that previously mentioned creative blog interview, Mortis Ghost had mentioned that he really enjoyed Persona 5. I wonder if the beautiful UIs in that game had influenced Ghost, inspiring him to spice things up for off's menus. In battles, the ATB system has returned, and so has all of your possible actions from the original off. The batter can even defend now, something he couldn't do in the original version. When you choose to defend in the remaster, not only will it reduce the damage you take, but you'll now even recover some competence points. The remaster's combat system also introduces a new critical mechanic. Sometimes during battle, this orange pulse will appear and quickly fill the ATB gauge. This pulse makes your next action more effective, so if you choose to attack, you'll deal more damage than usual. It lets you really swing for the fences. You might be thinking, okay, so you can dish out the occasional critical strike. So what? That's the interesting part. This crit mechanic can be used for any of your actions. If you go to objects and use a healing item with a crit, the item will heal more than it normally does. If you defend with a crit, you'll block 75% of damage instead of 50% and recover 20 competence points instead of 10. Really thinking about how you want to spend that crit adds a whole new strategic layer to combat that wasn't present in the original game. I had a lot of fun experimenting with the crit mechanic to see how it would affect each of my actions. For example, one of the batter's abilities, Wide Angle, gives you information on the enemy. Using it allows you to see how much HP the enemy has left, but it only shows you a white bar with no numerical value. However, if you spend a crit on Wide Angle, you'll now see the exact number of HP this enemy has. Pretty cool. Enemies also gain access to this new crit system. During battle, we can now see each enemy's ATB gauge, and when it starts to glow orange, that means they've got a strong attack coming your way. This encouraged me to really pay attention during battles and actually use the defend action. I'll be honest, until making this video, I forgot that defending was even an option in the original off. The remaster also rebalances the stats from the original game. HP, competence points, and the other stats have all been heavily adjusted. For example, by the time the batter reached level 10 in the original off, I was close to 1000 HP. But in the remaster, I only had about 200 HP. It's a considerable difference. So you won't be able to fly through this game as easily as you could in the original. My main gripe with the original game was how easy it is, and I'm happy to report that the remaster mostly fixes that. There was a point where I was exploring the smoke mines in Zone 1, and I thought to myself, damn, these ghosts are kicking my ass. Then I thought, oh my god, these ghosts are kicking my ass. The game is like kinda difficult now. One enemy in particular that gave me a really hard time was the new Spectre Mites. These little guys aren't very strong, but their ATB gauge fills up quickly and they often get critical attacks. This shouldn't be too much of a problem though if you've been carefully managing your competence points and you've taken time to remember each enemy's weakness. Which brings me to my next point. Elemental affinities. In Off, most enemies have an elemental weakness. Unlike a typical RPG, we don't have access to fire, ice, lightning, and wind magic. Instead, Off has metal, plastic, smoke, and meat. By using the wide angle competence, you can see the enemy's stats and their elemental affinities. This information wasn't super helpful in the original game for one big reason. So, the batter is the only one in your party who will learn elemental competences. There's only one add-on that learns an ability to deal elemental damage, but the gimmick is that the element is chosen at random, so you can't really take advantage of weaknesses with this party member. So the batter is the only one who can really take advantage of elemental weaknesses. Okay, that's all fine and good. The problem is that you need to do a shit ton of grinding before learning all 4 of the batter's elemental competences. You don't learn the final elemental competence until you're level 35 in the original game. To put that into perspective, I managed to beat the game at around level 14. At that point, you'll only know 2 elemental abilities that dish out metal and plastic damage. So you kinda just gotta cross your fingers and hope that whatever enemy you're fighting is either weak to metal or plastic, unless you want to grind. This has been changed in the remaster. The batter now starts with the first elemental competence, Run with Courage, at level 1. By the time you're level 13, you'll have unlocked all 4 elemental abilities. This allows you to actually take advantage of elemental weaknesses without having to grind for hours on end. In fact, all of your party members now learn their abilities much earlier than usual. Now that the party wasn't as powerful as they were in the original, it was nice to use all these different abilities that I used to never think twice about. Overall, I think that the combat in the remaster is a lot of fun. Combat still isn't Off's greatest quality, but this is a dramatic improvement from what we originally had. Whether it's your first time playing Off or you're a longtime fan of the original, I think you'll have a good time with this revamped combat system. With the basics of combat out of the way, I want to shift focus onto the new boss fights added in the remaster. The original Off only had 1 secret boss, while the remaster adds 6 for anyone who's willing to step up to the plate. The bosses are each found in obscure locations, which made it pretty fun to track them down. One of them can even be found on the world map. That's so cool. All of these bosses are based on the different cards that you acquire throughout the game. These cards give you access to new areas, and they're named after different zodiac signs. We have a Leo card, Cancer card, Pisces card, Aquarius card, Sagittarius card, and the Aries card. I really like the Zodiac bosses. My favorite thing about the bosses is that most of them have a unique mechanic that they use in battle. Understanding how these mechanics work and using them to your advantage is the key to victory. It also helps that these bosses feel totally different from the mandatory story bosses. The only Zodiac boss that plays like a regular boss encounter is Justice. This little guy's special gimmick is that he uses the same attacks that your add-ons have. Outside of that, there's not really anything you need to worry about. Standard battle tactics will be enough to get you through this fight. My favorite Zodiac boss has to be Carnival. This is the boss we find on the world map. This guy has a cool gimmick where he'll start different games. There's the game of Aquarius, Pisces, Cancer, and Leo. When he activates these games, he'll mimic the attacks of the correlating Zodiac boss. So when he activates the game of Leo, he'll use that boss's healing ability. In addition to that mechanic, you and Carnival can also win prizes during the battle. It's not a literal prize like an object, rather winning a prize will fill up a chunk of your ATB gauge. So if you keep winning prizes over and over, you'll be able to act multiple times before it's Carnival's turn again. The tricky part is figuring out how to get prizes, since there's a specific action you need to perform in order to win a prize. This secret action is also tied to whichever game Carnival has started, so you need to figure out how to win prizes in all 4 of his games. I really enjoyed experimenting during this battle and observing Carnival's actions to figure out what wins you a prize. I'd see that he won a prize after attacking my party, then I would try to attack, and then I wouldn't get a prize. Then I realized, oh, it has to be an elemental attack. This fight feels like its own little puzzle, and it's so satisfying once you figure it all out. Racking up prizes left and right makes you feel like a genius. The most difficult Zodiac boss absolutely has to be Cobb. We find this one in the Red Room that was teased back in November. There's not a whole lot to explore, unfortunately, it's just the boss here. But still, I think it's pretty cool, like aesthetically. This boss has 6 attacks that he cycles through on a loop. The main thing you have to watch out for is when Cobb stares at one of your party members. After a few turns, Cobb will heal the targeted party member, then on the following turn, he'll do an absurd amount of damage to them. This party member will die here and there's no way to avoid it. The only way to counter this ability is to just have a bunch of revival items on hand. That part's kinda lame. Cobb can also inflict your party with Vilify. This status effect makes it impossible to use competences or items. Eventually, Cobb will remove this status effect from the party, but you'll only have a few turns to act before you're vilified again. Oh yeah, Cobb also has the ability to heal himself. So that's just great. You have to keep your eye on the ball during this fight. My strategy was to use the batter to heal up my party while having add-on Alpha apply poison to Cobb. I used add-on Epsilon to buff my party's strength, allowing them to do some pretty nice damage even if they were vilified. I also went out of my way to get a special weapon for the batter that allows him to attack twice in a row. It took a lot of preparation, but I appreciate the challenge that Cobb offered. The other bosses also gave me a fair bit of trouble, but it was kind of refreshing and nice to have bosses in this game that challenged me so much. I've always enjoyed the super bosses in the Final Fantasy games, and I'm happy that Off has an equivalent to that, even if these bosses may not be as difficult as, say, the Ruby and Emerald weapons. I hate this guy. I hate this guy so much. When we're not battling specters or getting demolished by a giant crab, we'll be exploring this strange world and solving puzzles. As far as I know, the puzzles haven't changed all too much from the original to the remaster. After beating the remaster, I replayed through the original game and I was able to reuse my puzzle notes just fine. A majority of the puzzles in Off are number puzzles that require you to discover a certain code or number sequence. You'll find clues scattered in the environment or from chatting with NPCs. There will be many times where you need to write things down, and I'm a huge fan of stuff like this. Focusing on all the little details in this world not only helped me find clues, but it also allowed me to get fully immersed in these strange environments. I also began to notice all of the little flourishes added in the remaster. For instance, when the batter runs, he now leaves behind these little dust clouds. When he climbs ladders, he actually has a climbing animation now. When he runs in the rain, he'll create small ripples in the water. These changes are really small, and you might not even notice them even if you are familiar with the original game. But I feel like they go such a long way in making the remaster feel so much more polished. Anyways, back to the puzzles. There's this really good one in Zone 3 where you need to enter the right button combo on a controller. You can find a strange clue on a sheet of paper in one of the rooms, but it really doesn't help much. If you bring a music box to this character, he advises you to check the game's README file. So if you minimize the game, go to the files location and click on the README, you'll find a wall of text. At first, it all looks totally irrelevant, but if you scroll down to the FAQ section, you'll find this bit of info. Question: are there any secret codes to unlock stuff? Answer: there is one, namely this one. Down, left, up, right, ZJBDB start. This code, combined with that piece of paper from earlier, tells you exactly what you need to enter on the controller. This is my favorite puzzle in the original game, and I was really curious to see how they'd handle it in the remaster, since, you know, you can't access a game's README file on the Switch. In the remaster, this NPC says that the important button combo is hidden right underneath our screen. After this interaction, a drawer slides out from the right side of the screen, and inside we find a sheet of paper with the button combo on it. However, as you can see, this information is awkwardly cut off by the sides of the screen. For some reason, when I ran this game in full screen mode, the code was cut off. The only way to get around this issue was by switching the game to windowed mode. The same thing kinda happens for the brand new pillar box art that they added in the remaster. I went through the effort of editing out the art because it all looks really awkward when it's cut off like this. Here's a screenshot of what the gameplay should normally look like, and here's what's on my screen. Apparently the devs are aware of this issue and they'll hopefully have a fix out for it soon. I'm not too upset about it though, since this was the only time that something like this happened, and it probably isn't even an issue on the Switch version. I mentioned it earlier, but since ACC wouldn't be returning, we got an entirely new soundtrack composed by a slew of talented artists. The soundtrack of the remaster is definitely the most contentious aspect of the game. Off's sound is integral to the game's identity. It helps not only flesh out the unique, surreal atmosphere, but it's also a huge part of what makes this game so memorable. From the chaotic electro swing of Pepper Steak, to the gentle whimsy of A Stab of Happiness, there's so much to love from the original soundtrack. Having to use new music in the remaster obviously meant that a lot of people weren't going to be happy. A demo for Off was released on May 27th that gave players the opportunity to play the game all the way up to the first boss fight. There were a lot of diehard fans of the original game that really didn't like the tracks they heard in the demo. A lot of them felt like the new music wasn't a satisfactory replacement for the original soundtrack. However, there was one track in particular that was especially controversial. The track used for the game's first boss, Dedan, has a quirky little motif included. I'll let you hear it for yourself. That motif comes from Undertale, specifically a track called Bone Trousel. This track is heavily associated with a character named Papyrus. The creator of Undertale, Toby Fox, has stated that earlier iterations of Papyrus were somewhat inspired by Dedan from Off. Since Dedan's theme was being composed by Fox, having the Bone Trousel motif in there was a little full circle moment. Yet, there were a ton of people who were pissed about this version of Dedan's theme, and it was changed in the final release. On June 6th, Mortis Ghost himself released a statement regarding feedback on the demo. The statement focused particularly on the feedback relating to the new soundtrack. A piece of text from this statement reads as follows. Regarding the feedback that focuses on differences from the original version, which often necessarily involves the new soundtrack, but also a few other small changes, I can easily understand the difficulty some of you have in appreciating elements that replace those that you've known and are attached to. But I want to remind you first and foremost that this version doesn't intend to replace the previous one, which remains and will always remain available for free to everyone. At no point there's any intention of removing, one way or the other, the Alias Conrad Coldwood soundtrack, which is a very important part of the atmosphere of the original experience. Constraints forced us to choose to offer you this new soundtrack, which should be seen as another musical dressing for the world of Off, and not as a final addition, canceling the previous one. I bring this up because I think it's best to view the new soundtrack the way Ghost puts it, a new musical dressing for the world of Off. This soundtrack shouldn't be seen as the definitive or best version. It's simply a new way to experience a world that we all know and love. And if we ever want to return to that original game, we can do so at any time. Ghost has stated multiple times that he wants the original game to always be available for free. Of course, I'm not saying that the new soundtrack is free from criticism either. If you gave the new soundtrack a fair shake and you just didn't like it, that's fine. I just hope that people are able to judge the tracks for what they are instead of judging them by whether or not they're suitable replacements for the originals. If the remaster is your first time playing through Off, I'm really interested in what you have to say about the soundtrack. But what about me? What do I think? This is my video. I should say how I feel about things. I think that the soundtrack is really good. I like it a lot. Can you imagine all that buildup and I just say that I hate it? Morosque's ambient tracks are perfect for the world of Off. These tracks are often slow, haunting pieces that feel equal parts chilling and meditative. I think my favorite track by Morosque is No Precipitation. It plays on the roof of the post office in Zone 1. I feel like it perfectly embodies that chill, somber mood of a rainy day. It's the kind of song that I could listen to for hours on end as I write the night away, which may or may not be what I'm doing at the time of writing. James Roach also did a few songs that I really like. The track Window Shopping plays at the mall in Zone 2 and it's fantastic. It sounds like if you took normal mall music, let it rot in the grave for a couple of years, then blasted it on the mall's speakers. It really nails that feeling of isolation in what is typically a very lively place. Here it's just you and all the specters out for blood. I also really like Glimmer of Fun, which plays at the theme park in Zone 2. This track really expresses that spooky Halloween vibe. I've been listening to a lot of spooky music to get into the Halloween spirit, and Glimmer of Fun has been a welcome addition to my playlist. It's sitting there right next to Hang Castle from Sonic Heroes and Ghost Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy. But what about the new battle theme? The track that I was most eager to hear after learning that there would be a new soundtrack. I was also really curious about who would be assigned the Herculean task of creating a new battle theme for this game. That task was, of course, given to Toby Fox. In an interview with Fox on the Off website, he talks about how he created this battle theme. I also was assigned the normal battle theme. I'm gonna be honest. Just feels like I got assigned to take a bullet in the back for everybody else. I looked up almost every jazz song from the 1920s. I commissioned Carlos to make an entire fake jazz song for me so I could cut it up into samples. I tried making like 6 entirely different songs, but nothing I could come up with on my own felt quite right. In the end, I summoned Camellia to help me out by remixing my first track into multiple versions. And so ultimately, I think it will feel pretty cool as you go through the game, but I'll be the first to say that I can't replace your memories. Clearly, a lot of care went into making a track that captures the same energy as Pepper Steak. The new battle theme, White Meat, is similar to Pepper Steak in the way that it incorporates jazz samples to create an electro swing kind of vibe. At first, I was kind of just okay with White Meat. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but over time it really grew on me. Whenever I would put the game down, I'd find myself humming this tune as I went about my day. Something really cool about this battle theme is how it's remixed and used for the other zones in the game. In Zone 2, we have White Rot, a much more upbeat and frenzied variation. In Zone 3, we have White Carcass, a slower, more industrial sounding version of the track. All 3 of these battle themes sound great, but my favorite has to be White Carcass. This version of the battle theme is just so sinister and macabre. It really fits with the grim nature of this zone. All in all, I think you'll find a lot to love about this game's soundtrack. The only thing I've yet to go over is this game's story, which hasn't changed at all in the remaster. There were a few bits of dialogue changed in the English translation, but other than that, everything remains the same. Except the batter doesn't call Enoch a lardass anymore. I've held back from saying anything about the story because I believe that it is Off's greatest quality. I had such a good time immersing myself in this strange world and trying to piece together how it all came to exist. I genuinely think that you should go into this game knowing as little as possible. But if you want the basic rundown, I'd be happy to explain. Like I mentioned earlier, we take control of the batter and guide him on his sacred mission to purify the world. The world is divided up into 4 major areas that we journey through: Zones 0, 1, 2, and 3. Each of these areas serve a unique purpose in this world. Zone 0 is the exception as it's your basic tutorial area. The judge tells us that no living beings inhabit this place, so there's nothing special here. Nothing at all. Nothing. Zone 1 is where the 4 elements of this world are produced and shipped out to all the other zones. Smoke is released from the mines. Metal is harvested from the inside of cows, plastic is shipped out to all the other zones at the post office, and meat is obtained from the meat fountains. Smoke, metal, plastic, and meat are the 4 main elements that make up this world. It's anyone's guess as to which one is the most important. Zone 2 is a more chilled out place full of fun areas where people can hang out. There's the residential area, a library, a shopping mall, and the amusement park. Free from a life of toil, the residents here are able to enjoy a more comfortable life. Well, any normal person would be able to enjoy it. Zone 3 is home to a giant factory where its residents live and work. The people here work to produce a special secret element: sugar. If the employees work well, they're rewarded with all kinds of sugary desserts. You might want to judge them, but if you had to spend your entire life eating nothing but meat, I'm sure you'd be jumping at the opportunity to have a little sweet treat. All 4 of these zones are made up of simple, colorful shapes, while the characters are all black and white. It's such an oddball design choice that goes a long way in making this world extremely memorable. It also helps out a lot with navigation. I had a much easier time remembering each location by tying them to their color. The library is blue, the amusement park is pink, and the inside of the factories are green. See? I didn't even need to look it up, and my memory is terrible. The colors also help me a lot with navigation. I had a much easier time remembering each location by tying them to their color. The library is blue, the amusement park is. During the off 15th anniversary stream, Mortis Ghost revealed a lot of information about the game. During this stream, he mentioned that off was heavily inspired by Suda51's Killer 7. The game had greatly influenced off in terms of aesthetics, story, and the game's violent nature. To this day, Mortis Ghost loves Killer 7, and I've heard that people who enjoy off also really like this game. Maybe I should give it a shot. I had a lot of fun playing through No More Heroes, so I'm sure that I'd also probably like Killer 7. Maybe? I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the characters in off were all hand-drawn by Mortis Ghost on paper, then scanned into the game. All the characters in this game have a jagged, scribbly look to them. It looks really cool. The art style was a huge part of what made me want to play the original off. Back in high school, I had a few friends who were artists, and they would often show me the random messy sketches that they made. They would eventually clean up their drawings and give it a more polished look, but I always loved the scattered look of their early sketches. Even to this day, I really enjoy the rough look of a simple doodle. Back in Zone 1, we meet the residents of this land who use the 4 elements to survive. This is Elson, and so is this guy, and this guy, and you get the picture. These little men in business attire make up a majority of the population. They're all very polite and incredibly anxious little guys. The Elson in Zone 1 are the laborers that work on harvesting the different elements. The Elson in Zone 2 are all extremely paranoid and can't enjoy any of the recreational activities. The Elson in Zone 3 are also laborers like in Zone 1, but they're just a tad sugar dependent. I love these guys so much. I spoke to every single Elson I could find. They're a big part of what makes it so much fun to explore Off's world. My favorite group of Elson are the ones that you find at the amusement park in Zone 2. The roller coaster here is just a series of chairs that are set up in the style of a roller coaster. I really want this seat, so I'm just waiting for him to be done. I feel like I'm gonna vomit. Outside of the Elson, we'll occasionally run into the judge. This mysterious cat seems to be pretty knowledgeable about this world. He teaches the batter how to fight and even offers hints on certain puzzles. He's also got an archaic vocabulary that can make it difficult to understand what he's saying at times. Dude, who the hell is using the word interlocutor? Real quick, I need to ask you something. When you see the judge here, what do you think he sounds like? Anytime I replay off, I see the judge and I immediately hear the cat from Coraline. He's voiced by Keith David, in case you were wondering. I can also see the judge sounding like the Cheshire Cat in Alice Madness Returns. That one's voiced by Roger L. Jackson. Further adding on to the judge's mysterious nature, in our very first encounter with him, he acknowledges the player's existence. When he first meets the batter, he also asks for the name of who is controlling him. From this point onward, the judge will address the player directly, referring to the batter as our puppet. Before you roll your eyes at yet another indie game that has meta story elements, you should know that Off was one of the first ones to do it. If you enjoyed the meta elements from games like One Shot and Undertale, I think you'll really enjoy how Off goes about it. But that's about all I can say without getting into spoilery stuff. Back to the Off 15th anniversary stream, Mortis Ghost stated that the meta storytelling in Off was inspired by the meta moments in Metal Gear Solid 2. Back then, he was really shaken up about being acknowledged by the game. And I get it. The meta moments in Metal Gear Solid 2 are really creepy and unsettling.
Raiden, turn the game console off right now.
What did you say?
The mission is a failure. Cut the power right now.
What's wrong with you?
Don't worry, it's a game. It's a game just like usual.
You'll ruin your eyes playing so close to the TV.
Outside of the judge and the batter, the only other person that speaks directly to the player is this game's merchant, Zachary. This guy is the best. When we meet him in Zone 1, he has no problem instantly shattering the fourth wall. But he goes a step further than the judge and the batter, understanding that he's living inside of a video game. He refers to himself as the items merchant that's necessary in every video game. It doesn't seem like he has any malintent though. Zachary is just a chill dude who's happy to sell us items. I also really like his little laughter that plays whenever we speak to him. He's just so cool, you know? His design is also pretty neat, always hiding behind that toad mask with just his hair and neck poking out. Old art of Zachary created by Mortis Ghost depicted him having wings and a giant sword, and this just doesn't appear in the game at all. It makes me so sad. The wings and the sword are so badass. I had my fingers crossed that in the remaster they would add Zachary as a party member or maybe even an optional boss. Neither of those things happened, but I can still dream. Guys, I won't get too deep into it, but back in the day, Zachary went triple platinum on Tumblr. I never engaged directly with the off fandom, I just sort of watched from the sidelines, and holy shit did I see so much Zachary fan art. And in all honesty, it warms my heart to see so much love for this character. When I saw that Zachary cosplayer earlier this year, I wanted to say something so bad, but I chickened out. I just think that Zachary would be a cool guy to invite over and play Left 4 Dead with. You know what I mean? The only other character I can really talk about without spoiling too much is the Batter himself. The Batter is a stoic guy that is hell-bent on accomplishing his sacred mission. He's not the type to mince words, his only focus is doing what he set out to do. He also has this strange quirk where he talks to his enemies like an evangelical gone mad. Show yourselves, corrupted children. I'm the voice of forgiveness, come to eliminate your wretched forms. Prepare yourselves to suffer my judgment. His messianic nature is a bit self-righteous. I feel like this aspect of the Batter is reflected very well in his face portrait. He looks so smug and condescending. It's perfect for someone who talks like, well, that. There's a lot of small interactions that also give you a better understanding of the Batter's personality. For example, in Zone 2, the Batter refuses to sit in the backseat of the roller coaster. He really prefers the front seat instead. Little details like these help me understand that the Batter isn't as emotionless as he may seem. And that's about all I can say about that. With control of the Batter, we go on an adventure throughout all the zones and do everything we can to accomplish his mission. I know that was kind of vague, but now you at least know some of the characters and where this journey will take you. Now I want to dedicate this portion of the video to the story, bosses, and the final level. If you haven't played off and you're still here, I strongly advise that you either skip ahead to the timestamp on screen or go and play the game. It's on Steam, it's on Switch, and hey, the original version of the game is free to play. Not including any of the side content, it takes roughly 5 to 6 hours to beat off, so you can... Whoa. Not including any of the side content, it takes roughly 5 to 6 hours to complete off. You could do that in a Saturday afternoon. Alright, this is your last warning before things get all spoilery. Okay, are we all good? Ready to go? Okay, let's do it. Halfway through Zone 1, we meet Dedan, this zone's guardian. Each of the 3 zones has a guardian that all serve a mysterious leader known as the Queen. When we meet Dedan, we overhear him bullying one of the Elsen. The Batter, after seeing this behavior, instantly wants to kill Dedan. God, he's so real. The Batter states that Dedan is evil and that he must destroy him. It can be assumed at this point in the story that by purifying the world, the Batter is attempting to cleanse this world of all the evil that inhabits it. And that includes a malicious guy like Dedan. We eventually reach Dedan at his headquarters in Alma. What part of I'm going to kill you didn't you understand? I'm here to eliminate you. You're insane. Dedan and the other boss fights are all a lot more enjoyable in the remaster. Thanks to the new combat system, I was actually paying attention to what the boss was doing instead of just brute forcing it like I did in the original. Dedan also had his stats heavily adjusted from the original game. Originally, he had a shit ton of HP and very high defense. He would also summon a little speech bubble that could inflict status ailments on the party. Then it was just a matter of attacking and healing until Dedan eventually died. I'm happy to say that my fight against Dedan wasn't nearly as long in the remaster. The fight plays out nearly identically to the original, but now it's much shorter and there's this little clock that appears in the background of the fight. Anytime someone acts, the minute hand spins around the clock and the hour hand jumps forward a little bit. Once it's 12 o'clock, Dedan will either use his hour hand or half-past competence. Hour hand puts the target to sleep, while half-past grants Dedan the hasty status effect, causing his ATB gauge to fill much faster than usual. The little clock is a really neat detail that doesn't change too much about the battle. Sadly, I only realized what the clock meant after I had already killed Dedan. Oops. Anyways, 1 tyrant down, 2 to go. Moving on to Zone 2, the guardian here is a small cat named Japhet. When we encounter him in the library, he claims to be the leader of the Spectres, stating that the Queen sent them so that he could restore justice to this zone. Weirdly enough, the Spectres don't always obey Japhet's command. almost like he's not really in charge. He also thinks that he's not a cat and that he's actually a firebird. The judge informs us that this cat is actually his dear brother Valerie, and it's possible that Valerie's just lost his mind. Along with the judge, we find Valerie on the roof of the library. The judge tries to talk some sense into him, but Valerie insists that he is Japhet. Valerie's jaw is then ripped open, revealing a small bird inside. This bird is Japhet, and he's taken control of Valerie's body. The judge is rightfully heartbroken, but the batter is just whatever. During the battle with Japhet, he slowly crawls out of Valerie's corpse until he's free. Even when the Firebird has been liberated, Valerie's dead corpse hangs from their head. It's really upsetting. During the off 15th anniversary stream, Mortis Ghost confirmed that Japhet was inspired by Valagarmanda from Final Fantasy VI. In FF6, this character is a giant bird that was sealed away in a block of ice. Ghost is a huge fan of the Final Fantasy games, so they had a lot of influence on his work. When Ghost was on Creative Block, he stated that Final Fantasy VIII is one of his favorite games. This hasn't been confirmed, but I like to think that the batter's aloof personality may have been inspired by Squall from FF8. Japhet's main gimmick in battle is that he uses his competences in a specific order: soprano, alto, head voice, warble, and tenor. The main thing you need to watch out for is the alto and tenor abilities, which inflict mute and poison respectively. The trick is to be stocked up on items to remove that poison. Then focus on having the Omega add-on use inverse perspective to cure mute. It's not a super difficult fight, but I did get rocked for spending my competence points too carelessly. This battle, alongside the new optional bosses, taught me to be a lot more careful about how I spend those competence points. In the remaster, you're hard capped at 100 competence points. Unless you use a Taurus orb to gain an additional 15, you're stuck at 100. On the bright side, there are some items that you can buy at the shop to restore your competence points, so it's not a huge deal. Plus, you can even get some points back by defending. You can also use crits to restore way more competence points than normal, so you've got a few options for staying topped off. I also have to bring up the track that plays during Japhet's battle. Phoenix is a straight banger, it's so damn good. I feel like it really carries the emotional weight of Japhet's backstory while also just being a really good song. From the books in the library, we learn that Japhet was once a benevolent and compassionate ruler. He really cared for all the residents of Zone 2 until they had all become extremely neurotic. This greatly irritated Japhet, who then decided to let his citizens fall prey to the specters. As the ghosts ravaged this zone, Japhet sat in wait on the roof of the library, waiting for the batter to arrive and kill him. Deep down though, Japhet knew that what he did was evil and that he deserved to be punished. Japhet is such an interesting and tragic character. Unlike the other Guardians, there's a part of him that recognizes that he failed to protect his people and that he's terrible for what he did to them. As far as we know, the other Guardians never think twice about their actions, believing that they're free to rule over their zone however they please. But Japhet earnestly cared for his people until they became so anxious that they could barely enjoy being alive. After reading the pages detailing Japhet's backstory, I didn't want to kill him. Unlike Dedan, I felt like Japhet could have been reasoned with and potentially turned into an ally. On my first playthrough of the game, this was the moment where I thought that maybe there was an alternative to the batter's extreme methods. Well, it's not like we can go back now. Zone 3's Guardian is Enoch, a big man that wears an outfit similar to the Elsens. The Elsens here all work at Enoch's giant factory. Employees at the factory are given sugar for their labor. While it may seem like a harmless form of payment, the Elsens are all extremely addicted to this substance. Many of the factory Elsens are agitated and hostile, causing them to turn into monsters. In addition to getting all of his employees addicted to sugar, Enoch also tells his employees that the Spectres are super nice and that you should totally trust them. They're not, by the way, they still kill people. Sugar is actually made from the corpses of Elsens, so by tricking them into getting killed by the Spectres, the sugar production will skyrocket. Enoch is a cold bastard that only cares about turning a profit. When we confront Enoch and tell him that he's going to be purified, he asks if the Queen was the one who sent us. That's pretty weird. Guess they're not on good terms. We try to fight Enoch, but we're forced to run, and the batter doesn't call him a lardass. Enoch does catch up to us, but he's exhausted himself, so now the battle can begin for real. At the very start of battle, Enoch uses Spurred Moment to inflict himself with a serious status effect. This ability came out of left field. He never used this competence in the original game, and I had no idea what Sirius did to a target. Based on my observation alone, I think that Sirius makes a target's ATB gauge fill faster and increases the odds of getting a crit. I noticed that later in the fight when Sirius wears off and Enoch becomes tired, his ATB gauge was a lot slower. He also didn't get another critical attack for the rest of the battle. Outside of the Sirius status effect, Enoch will use abilities that inflict party members with Poison or Furious. Poison isn't a big deal anymore now that we have a party member who can cure this status effect, so it's mainly Furious that you have to worry about. Even then, none of my party members stayed Furious for too long, they always calmed down pretty quickly. Overall, I think that the story bosses in the remaster are pretty good, though part of me does wish that they had all received a new gimmick similar to Enoch's Spurred Moment ability. This might just be a matter of personal preference though. I really like when remasters and remakes change enemy behavior. It's always so fun and horrifying to see an enemy that you know so well suddenly do something that they've never done before. As Enoch's decapitated head sits on the floor, he drops a major bombshell of information. He explains that without the zone's guardian, the zone will soon vanish and fall into nothingness. The batter is completely unfazed by these words. One thing that I love about this reveal is how it's foreshadowed at the very beginning of the game. Dedan says, "I am the guardian of Zone 1. It's nothing without me." On your first playthrough, you'll naturally assume that Dedan is just saying that the people of Zone 1 will be lost without his guidance. You'd never guess that he literally meant that Zone 1 would disappear. If you try to revisit any of the previous zones, you'll see that Enoch wasn't bluffing. The zones are now completely devoid of color and life. Even the music is gone. All you can hear are hushed murmurs and the occasional shouting. All that's left in these zones are a bunch of monsters called secretaries. These morbid creatures have varying appearances depending on which zone you're in. They all kind of look like gross, bloated humans. In an interview with Smash Jump, Mortis Ghost explains that Tetsuo's final transformation in the film Akira was fundamental to the designs of the secretaries. It's really cool to see Akira's influence outside of the dozens of bike slide Easter eggs we've seen throughout the years. It's always nice seeing the more horrifying qualities of this movie get some love. Though, as creepy as these guys may look, they are hands down the worst part of exploring the purified zones. They're a bit tough at first, but as you level up, they get easier and easier to deal with. What sucks about the secretaries is that they appear frequently and you can't run away from them. There's no way to reduce random encounters or temporarily disable them with an item like Pokemon's Repel. You'll do a lot of fighting here. The purified zones are also where you'll find 3 of the new optional bosses. It was kind of fun searching for the bosses, but once I beat them, I quickly got the hell out of there. I hate these guys. If you go back to the library in Zone 2, you can climb onto the roof where we fought Japhet. Before we climb the ladder to the roof, we can hear a very distinct meowing. On top of the roof, we find the judge. What are you doing? I am meowing at the top of my lungs, pretending the echoes belong to someone I used to know. Have you seen my dear brother? The judge continues to walk around on the roof, calling out to someone who will never answer his cries. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like we're really the heroes of this story. All that's left now is a location called The Room. This location is divided up into 5 chapters, starting on chapter 5. During this chapter, we learn the backstory of a child who once lived here. From the notes left behind by this child, we learn that he doesn't like this place, but he's happy to be here with his father. The child is apparently sick and has to spend a lot of time here taking medicine. Progressing further into the room, we eventually reach an area full of crudely drawn specters. They all look as if they were drawn by a kid with some chalk. When we manage to escape this area, we see one last message from the child explaining that he and his father are supposed to play outside tomorrow. The next chapter is chapter 4. I had 3 friends. In this chapter, we play through one of the child's memories, with the batter being a stand-in for the child. In this flashback, we go outside and find 3 people to visit. These people are the Zone Guardians, but before they became all evil and stuff. When we chat with Dedan, he asks us to retrieve something to tell him what day it is. After bringing Dedan a calendar page, he says that it doesn't matter since it probably isn't that day anymore. When the child asks about his mom, Dedan assures him that his mother will be back from the new world soon. Dedan believes that the child's mother will somehow reset this bizarre world that they're living in. He then gives us a book with an unreadable title and we take it to Japhet. By handing over the book, Japhet agrees to help us get Enoch out of this giant hole he's stuck in. With all three guardians reunited at Dedan's house, they thank the child for his help. They all agree to keep the child company as they wait for his mother's return. Dedan then suggests sketching out the plans for the countries that will be theirs. The Guardians all then fantasize about creating their own perfect utopias. This chapter ends with another message from the child. The child's message reads, "Papa left. I don't like him anyways. I hope you'll be back soon. I made 3 friends today." As the boy describes all 3 of the people he met, each of the batter's add-ons appear on screen, suggesting that there's a connection between them and the Guardians. Following that, we begin Chapter 3, The World in a Window. In this chapter, we mostly solve puzzles scattered around the room. Dude, I got stuck here for a few hours on my first playthrough of the game. The puzzles here kicked my ass, it was so embarrassing. My favorite puzzle here is the one where you're suddenly kicked back to the title screen. All of your save files are suddenly corrupted and all you can do is pick one and hope for the best. Depending on which save file you choose, you'll be able to explore a different area in the room. Hopping between the different save files is how you solve all the puzzles in this portion of the chapter. This mechanic also gives meaning to the chapter's name. A world in a window is this world. It's inside of a window on your computer screen, or your TV. The only bit of info we learn about the child in this chapter is that his father gave him a music box and a comic book. In Chapter 2, Boxer's Adventures, we get to read this comic book. The book's called Panic in Ballville, and it's about a boxer named Boxer. The boxer is having a great day until the notorious Ballman shows up. Ballman has filled Ballville with dozens of evil clones and even kidnapped Boxer's girlfriend. Now Boxer has to battle his way through the evil clones and save his girlfriend. Springing into action, Boxer makes quick work of the Ballman clones. Just look at that damage! Boxer soon catches up to the original Ballman, but his hordes of evil Ballman clones quickly overwhelm Boxer. This is really stupid. At the end of this chapter, the child reveals that his mother finally picked him up. That brings us to Chapter 1, The Queen, where we finally meet the person who rules over this land. When the batter and the queen meet face to face, their interaction is narrated by someone, potentially the child. The queen asks the batter why he had destroyed the world she built, and he responds that building this world wasn't what she was supposed to do. The queen was supposed to care for the child, but she failed to do so. Because of this, the batter must now purify the world. I only created all of this for him. I desire nothing more than the happiness of my children. Lost in preparations for the birthday party, you forgot who it was for. You have spoilt the carnival, batter. I will not let you lay a hand on the son who brought us into this world. Today you will fall. This dialogue reveals that the batter and the queen were both created by the child. It can be kind of confusing because while they are the child's creation, it's clear that they're also meant to represent the child's parental figures. The queen as the boy's mother and the batter as the boy's father. Once the battle begins, we see that the queen, like the batter, has her own set of royal add-ons, Delta, Sigma, and Epsilon. The clear connection between the batter and the queen makes this battle feel so hype. 2 sides finally coming together in an epic clash. I'm heartbroken to say that it was over before I knew it. Before fighting the queen, I went ahead and fought every optional boss. I also explored each of the purified zones, and because of the secretaries, I did a lot of unintentional grinding. I think that's why the battle against the queen was so easy. Hell, the giant crab gave me more trouble than the queen. Either way, it makes me so sad that such a huge story moment is like one of the easier fights in the game. I really hope that a future patch could adjust the stats of the queen for players who engage in the side content first. This is also an issue with the final fight, but we'll get to that soon. Once the queen is defeated, she speaks to the batter one last time. Would you like some coffee, my love? Queen of the Flies, it is time to join your disciples. It all went wrong. Now we must forget it all and dream sweet dreams. Look, he has your eyes, but they are full of fear. Finally, we reach Chapter 0, the batter. In this chapter, we finally confront the young boy. His name is Hugo. The boy doesn't put up a fight, and the batter easily kills him. I'm scared of the dark. From now on, there will be no more darkness. We make our way into a long empty corridor and approach a switch. But before we can do anything, we're confronted by the judge. The cat expresses regret in ever placing his trust in the batter, but he's also disturbed by the betrayal of the player. The judge addresses us directly and asks what our excuse is for killing a woman and child. At this point on my original playthrough, I had completely forgotten that the judge knew about the player since he didn't appear at all during Zone 3. As much as it felt like the batter was the true villain of this story, I also felt the guilt of just letting him destroy this world. The judge's speech here is a long overdue wake-up call. He asks us to join his side and stop the batter from destroying the world. But the batter demands that we stay and help him accomplish his mission. Now it's time for us to choose. We can either side with the batter or the judge. Sure, the world's been mostly destroyed, but do we want to see this guy get the satisfaction of winning? I think I've made up my mind. Siding with the judge, we enter battle and see a new side of the batter. The batter has transformed into a fearsome monster. A maw full of razor-sharp teeth have replaced his smug grin. Gigantic claws have replaced the firm hands that once clung onto a metal baseball bat, and his shut eyes are now wide open and vacant. Any doubts that you might have had about making the wrong choice are surely gone by now. The batter's horrifying monster form has been a mystery for a long time. Did he transform after the player leaves him? Did he always look like this? Or is this just how the judge sees the batter? During the previously mentioned 15th anniversary stream, Mortis Ghost mentioned that the batter's new form was inspired by a character from Killer 7. In this game, there's a character that appears as an angel, but the game suggests that this character merely views themselves as an angel. Their true form is something else entirely. Ghost really liked this idea of being able to present information that isn't really set in reality, though it should be noted that Ghost does leave it open to interpretation as to whether or not the batter does actually transform. This is the other fight I was talking about when I mentioned the Queen's battle being too easy. This final fight, regardless of who you side with, is really easy. You can freely spam your strongest attacks, pop an item to restore your competence points, and continue wailing on your opponent. It's pretty disappointing. I really hope that something can be done about the difficulty of these two fights in particular. I think some added difficulty could really make the battle feel important, like you're genuinely fighting for the fate of this world. My favorite thing about this battle is the song that plays during it. This track, chosen anew, does something really interesting if you listen for long enough. Dude, it's Pepper Steak! Isn't that so cool? When I heard this part of the song, I was grinning from ear to ear, dude. Oh, I was so stoked. You guys have to look up this song and listen to the whole thing in its entirety. It's so good. Defeating the batter finally puts his mad crusade to an end. The credits roll and occasionally we see the judge wandering the empty purified zones. It's far from a happy ending, but it's something. Siding with the batter gives us the true ending. After defeating the judge, we approach the switch and flip it, turning everything off. The room and all of its chapters are densely packed with information that'll answer some of your questions while leaving you with dozens more. There are many clues in the room that explain how Off's world was created, but the game doesn't ever give you a final answer. It's up to you to take these clues and piece together your own interpretation for Off's story. This is my favorite thing about Off. When I first completed the game, I remember reading up on hundreds of those story explained type posts on Tumblr. It was so much fun just looking at all the different ways that people had interpreted the game's story, especially because there are so many little details to consider when forming your own interpretation. For the most part, everyone could agree on the basic events that occur in the 4 main zones, but the discussion always got crazy once the room was thrown into the mix. I can't remember all of the theories I read, but I can vaguely recall just a few of them. One super popular theory suggested that the game is taking place in Hugo's mind as he's dying in a hospital. There are a lot of variations of the coma theory, but for the most part they're all about Hugo creating this world in his mind. Since he wasn't able to go outside often, all he had was this wonderland in his head. The Batter and the Queen are stand-ins for Hugo's parents. The Batter's quest to destroy the world is interpreted as Hugo's father wanting to take his son off life support. This is why the world ceases to exist after flipping the switch off. The Queen, Hugo's mother, fights the Batter because, of course, she wants her son to live. I was not the biggest fan of coma theories, so I never really vibed with this take on the story. Dude, it pissed me off so bad when I was in middle school and so many kids tried telling me that Ash was in a coma. But one thing I do like about the coma theory is how it contextualizes the off switch at the end of the game. This theory also gives context to the game's game over theme, stay in your coma. That part's cool as hell. Another theory that I saw get thrown around is what I'm calling the apocalypse theory. This theory explains that the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where nothing is left but the world we explore. Hugo, the Queen, and the Guardians all have the magical ability to shape worlds and even create life. Mortis Ghost has even confirmed multiple times that the Queen and the Batter were both created by Hugo. So to me, this theory always made a bit more sense, especially since Ghost was inspired by games like Final Fantasy and Killer 7, games that are full of supernatural elements. However you choose to interpret the game's story, there's a lot of fun to be had by taking the pieces of this narrative and shaping it into something that you can understand. I've always had a good time reading up on different interpretations for this game's story, so if you've got any crazy theories about this world, the story, or the characters, definitely let me know. I eat that stuff up. The last thing I have to say about Off is the song that plays as the credits roll. In the original game, Over the Rainbow was played. In the remaster, the song has been changed to If You Want the Rainbow. The chorus of the song reads, "Take your share of trouble, face it and don't complain. If you want the rainbow, you must have the rain. Happiness comes double after a little pain. If you want the rainbow, you must have the rain." It's a song about the joy waiting for you on the other side of an arduous experience. You can't have the rainbow without the rain. You can't have the good without the bad. I feel like the meaning of this song is warped depending on who you side with. Siding with the Batter makes this song feel a lot more depressing and cold. Rainbows, rain, good times, bad times, none of it matters anymore since it's all been destroyed. It's a very nihilistic feeling. Siding with the judge makes the ending feel a lot more hopeful than it did in the original. Like somehow the judge will salvage this world on the brink of collapse. Over the years, I've really grown to love the judge's ending more than the Batter's, even if it's not necessarily canon. Brand new quality of life features, an improved combat system, and a beautifully chilling soundtrack makes this version of Off a joy to play through. If you haven't already played the game, this version is a great way to experience this world. The refined gameplay in the remaster allows you to bypass a lot of the clunkiness present in the original game. Now, if you're a fan of the original and you're still really bitter about the ACC soundtrack, there is a mod for the Steam version of the game that restores the original music. This mod even includes 2 different options: the original 2008 soundtrack and the high-quality versions of this soundtrack. The high-quality version even adds parts of songs that weren't in the original. However you choose to play Off, you'll no doubt have a great time beating up ghosts, meeting oddball characters, and figuring out the complex story of this world. Off is no doubt an unforgettable experience. A huge thank you to my Spectral supporters over on Patreon. 2 years ago, on October 20th, I created this YouTube channel. I knew that from the get-go that I really wanted to talk about Off, but for some reason I felt like I had to work for it. At the start of my YouTube journey, I had no idea how to even make a video. Sure, I'd been watching YouTube videos since I was a kid, but that doesn't mean I knew how to do any of that stuff. I've played hundreds of video games, but I don't know the first thing about making my own. But as I continued working on videos, I genuinely felt like I was getting better and better after each upload. Looking back on my first video is like genuinely impossible. I recoil in disgust like somebody had just put a bug in my mouth. Genuinely, what was I cooking? Thanks to my batter profile pic, I have been getting comments about off non-stop since creating this channel. I'm kinda glad that it took me so long to work up the nerve to talk about this game, since now I'm able to talk about the remaster. Woo! In case any of you were wondering where the batter PFP came from, it wasn't just because of my love for off. When I came up with the name for my channel, I knew for a fact that I wanted the word ghost to be part of my username. Then I thought, wouldn't it be funny if I made my profile picture a character that spends all their time killing ghosts? Then that's what I did. Because originally I wanted my profile picture to be Zachary. I just love that guy. I'm sure that someday I'll commission some art and I'll change my profile picture, but I can't bring myself to get rid of the batter. This little guy's been here since day one and I've grown strangely attached to him. Sure, he's kind of a dick, but look at him and Zachary on the roller coaster. They're so cute. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want me to talk about any other RPG Maker games, please let me know. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go and get my hands on those Zachary pins. And maybe the plushie too. And maybe the deluxe version of the game that comes with the box and the cards, the batter bobblehead and the prequel comic. Look, my birthday's coming up and I deserve a little treat, you know? And you totally agree, right? Yes? Say yes? Enable my bad habits? Please? That's all I have for you guys. Take care, and happy Halloween! I didn't know where to put this in the video, but there's a scene in the game where the batter comes out of the smoke mines and he sees an Elson, and the Elson's like, "What the heck? How did you do that? How did you navigate through the mines?" And the batter responds by saying, I don't think this line was intended to be like funny or comical, but I saw it at like 2 a.m. and I like started dying. This phrase has permanently wormed its way into my brain, and it's so bad I can't stop saying it.